Fascism is a word that carries the weight of history. While it is often used today as a simple political insult, its true origins are found in a period of extreme global suffering. To understand how such a movement begins, we must look at the specific conditions that allow it to grow. It is not just about one person. It is about a calculated method of power that emerges when a society feels broken and hopeless. By looking at the patterns of the past, we can see how a fragile democracy can be dismantled from within. The story begins with the massive trauma of the First World War. Before 1914, the world was experiencing a period of incredible industrial growth. But the war changed everything. It brought destruction on a scale never seen before, with millions of lives lost in the trenches. When the conflict ended in 1918, many nations were left in ruins. In places like Italy, even though they were on the winning side, the people felt cheated and ignored. The economy was collapsing, and a sense of deep national shame began to spread through the streets. In this atmosphere of chaos, a new kind of movement started to take shape. It was led by former soldiers who felt betrayed by their own government. They believed that democracy was too weak and slow to solve the nation's problems. They began to preach a message of absolute unity and strength. Their symbol was a bundle of wooden sticks tied around an axe, an ancient image representing the idea that while one person is weak, a unified group is indestructible. This was the birth of a movement that valued force over conversation. These early followers did not want a traditional political party. They wanted a disciplined military-style organization. They believed that violence was a necessary tool to cleanse the nation. They began to target anyone they perceived as a threat to their unity, especially those organizing worker strikes or alternative political movements. For them, politics was no longer a debate. It was a battle for the soul of the country. They viewed their rivals not as fellow citizens, but as enemies who needed to be silenced by force. This movement soon created its own private security groups, thousands of uniformed men who functioned as a private army. They roamed the cities, attacking political offices and stopping protests with physical intimidation. While this violence was happening, the official government was divided and weak. They were unable to maintain order, which allowed these private groups to take control of entire regions. The public, tired of the chaos, began to look at these disciplined groups as a way to restore stability, even if it meant losing their freedom. A critical turning point occurred when the wealthy elites and business owners began to support this movement. They were terrified of a radical revolution from the working class and saw these disciplined groups as a way to protect their interests. Instead of defending democracy, they provided the funding and legitimacy the movement needed to enter the mainstream. Eventually, the leaders of this movement were invited into the government by those who thought they could control them. It was a fatal mistake that would soon lead to the total destruction of the democratic system. While the movement was gaining ground in southern Europe, another major nation in the center of the continent was facing an even deeper crisis. After the devastation of the First World War, Germany was left not only defeated, but deeply humiliated. The country was drowning in massive debt, and its currency had lost almost all of its value. Millions of people suddenly found themselves unemployed, and basic goods like bread became impossibly expensive. In this atmosphere of total desperation, the people began to lose faith in their traditional leaders and started looking for a radical solution to their suffering. In this moment of national shame, an extremist party began to rise by telling a powerful and dangerous story. They did not talk about complex economic policies. Instead, they created a myth of a superior people who had been betrayed from within. They claimed that the nation's current misery was the fault of specific minority groups and political rivals. They adopted an ancient symbol of strength and unity to represent their movement. This symbol became a way to unite angry, frustrated citizens under a single, disciplined identity, promising to return the country to its former glory. Following the examples of other movements, this group created its own large, private security force. These were thousands of men in uniform who marched through the cities, creating an image of order and power. They were not there to talk. They were there to silence anyone who spoke against the party's message. They targeted political meetings and used physical intimidation to clear the streets of their enemies. At the same time, the leaders of the movement were learning how to use the democratic system to their advantage. realizing that they needed to win over both the public and the powerful elites. The global economic crash of 1929 provided the final opportunity for this movement to seize control. As the economy collapsed further, millions more turned to this extremist party as their only hope. Just as we saw in other countries, the wealthy business owners and landowners were terrified of a radical worker revolution. They saw this rising movement as a strong shield that could protect their wealth and maintain social order. Believing they could manage the movement's radical ideas, the traditional political leaders eventually invited the movement's head into the heart of the government. Once they entered the halls of power, the movement moved with terrifying speed to dismantle the country's laws. Following a mysterious fire in the government's parliament building, they declared a national emergency and suspended all constitutional rights. They used this emergency to arrest their political rivals, shut down independent news outlets, and ban all other political parties. Within a very short time, the democracy was completely gone. It was replaced by a single-party state where the word of the leader was the only law, and total obedience was demanded from every citizen. By the mid-1930s, this vision of a purified nation became the official policy of the state. The government began to systematically strip specific groups of their rights and property, leading to organized campaigns of exclusion. The entire nation was transformed into a massive industrial and military machine, focused entirely on expanding its borders. The world watched as a once fragile democracy was replaced by a regime built on the glorification of conflict and national pride. This was the final step, the complete mobilization of an entire society toward a future built on total domination and war. After decades of global democratic growth, the world is now facing a surprising and challenging reversal. In many nations, we are seeing a decline in free societies, and the historical patterns of the past are becoming visible once again. Scholars are pointing to the rise of a specific style of leadership that mirrors the movements of the early 20th century. This involves promising to return a nation to a mythical, glorious past while focusing on a single, strong identity. It creates a familiar atmosphere of division, where complex problems are blamed on outsiders or specific minority groups. Experts are debating whether this is a complete return to the old ways or a new kind of challenge. In the modern world, this often looks like an illiberal democracy. This is a system where citizens still participate in elections, but the underlying rights that protect them are slowly eroded. The independent media is silenced, the power of the courts is weakened, and the government begins to demand total loyalty. It is a process of dismantling democracy from within, using the legal system itself to create a state where only one voice and one party truly matter. However, we must recognize that this modern movement does not always start with soldiers in the streets. Today, it often begins with a war of information. It starts when politics moves away from solving future problems and begins to focus on a fake, emotional history. When a leader claims that only they can save the nation from a traitorous enemy within, the essential ingredients of the old blueprint are already present. In our digital age, these messages can spread faster than ever before, creating deep bubbles of fear and distrust among fellow citizens. One of the most important lessons from our history is the role of the influential mainstream. In the past, these movements only succeeded when the wealthy elites and powerful business leaders decided to support them for their own short-term gain. Today, observers watch for this same alignment. When large corporations and political elites decide that a strongman is more useful for their profits than a fair and open democracy, the gates are opened for a more dangerous form of control. This shows that the health of a democracy depends on the choices made by those at the top as much as those at the bottom. Ultimately, studying these patterns is not about finding a perfect definition or winning a debate. It is about recognizing a specific method of power that relies on fear, inequality, and the suppression of the truth. History shows us that human societies often fall back into these dark instincts during times of great stress or economic crisis. We would be foolish to believe that our modern technology makes us immune to these ancient traps. We are still capable of choosing the desire for a total leader over the hard work of maintaining a free society. The purpose of understanding this history is to recognize the early warning signs while we still have the power to act. We do not have to wait for a complete collapse to notice when the foundations of our society are being weakened. By identifying the glorification of conflict, the blaming of the other, and the spreading of manipulated history, we can take steps to protect our future. History is not a circle that must repeat itself. It is a series of lessons that give us the tools to build a world based on truth, equality, and human rights.